Hello, hello. I hope you are all doing well. It is great to see you. I cleared out my sinuses a little bit. I won't go into details, it's kind of gross. But I'm able to breathe, so that's nice. My throat is still a little, give or take, a little off. But we're here, so it's good to see you all. I'm thrilled. Hicks, that dinner sounds absolutely awful. But I'm glad he likes it, Good for you, buddy. That's not for me. Queens, good to see you. Rio, hello. Skunk, welcome in. I'm glad, but ooh, yeah, no kidding. And for anyone that might be lurking in the background, welcome to you too. It's good to see you. So I use Streamlabs. David, hello. Atkinson, or should I say, no, Hatkinson. Huh, I gotcha. Yeah, I decided to not wear the hat today. I didn't feel like it. It's right over here, but it gets really warm sometimes when I wear the hat. Yeah, I don't know if any of you use Streamlabs OBS, but they did an update recently, and I didn't realize that now the chat panel, which is usually on the side of Streamlabs, has disappeared. I don't know if it's a setting, but I didn't realize it until I'd actually gone live. And also, usually when you click go live, before it actually launches you, it gives you the option to do all your edits. So I had to do that somewhere else. So, lots of strange changes. And I don't know. I'm very confused. A little perplexed. But, just rolling with it. That's what you do. So, on that note, let's head over to Stream Raiders real quick and get something going here before we get into our book, because we are almost done with the book, and I'm thrilled because it's such a cool story. So this is going to be a tough, both of these are 4 stars. We could go down here and just break ourselves in with a 1 star, I think, if it's going to let us do it. No, it won't. Yeah, we have to continue with the path. And the show goes on, exactly. Alright, so... no. Yep, we have to do this one. It has a chest, we have options to get gold. But we're going to need some units on this one, for sure. So, let's see how we do. Let's see what we're up against first. Alright, so they're all level 1s and level 5s, so that's not too bad. So we're gonna place right down here. Yeah. Archers, tanks. So I'm gonna put a tank right up front. And if I can get a few other tanks right here as well, that'd be great. And then we need lots of archers, as many archers as we can get. Get some support units in there. Put some melee in there. And then, of course, feel free to fill in anything else around that. Okay, there's our battle plan. Have at it. We might die, but you never know. Okay. Alright. So yes, I added a new stinger. I really like it. The whole, moving across the screen and all that. It's all good. Good stuff. It's all fun. Okay. So we are on chapter 5 of book 2, and yeah, there's only 10 chapters total in this, in the remainder of this is book 2, so we're halfway there, and I'm thrilled, because we have a lot of good books to get into. I don't know if you noticed in my Discord, but I added another book, this one right here, covering up the author's name, and my green screen, there we go. Ashley Hoffman is actually a streamer. She does a lot of Sea of Thieves, and I realized she was an author, so I was like, let me check out your book. So I did, and I picked it up, and I can't wait to read it. It's unfortunately at the end of the list, but we'll get there. Stunt Papa, hello, welcome in, good to see you. Hey bud, glad to see you here. More War of the Worlds, yes. We're going to get into it, and I will be adding, this is my public announcement, I will be adding a second streaming time during the week. I just haven't figured out when yet. How am I feeling? I'm starting to get there. I'm starting to get better. My throat is still a little irritated. I've still got a lot of, sinusy stuff going on. You can probably hear it in my voice. But beyond that, I'm doing alright. So, thank you for asking. My ceiling fan's on, so that's good. Get some airflow. Alright. So without further ado, let's... Dang, I'm frozen. You might need to refresh. If you just leave and come back, basically. Unless you mean you are literally frozen, then I can't help you. I got nothing. Don't know how to do that. Alright. Chapter 5 is called The Stillness. So let's get into this read. Let's get comfy as best as you can. Let's relax. You earned a flag bearer. What is that? A flag bearer is basically a support unit. It helps speed up the units around them and gives them a little bit of protection as well. Yes. Wow, indeed. Alright. So I will start reading, and I apologize if I miss anything in chat. I will come back to it. Okay. Chapter 5, The Stillness. My first act before I went into the pantry was to fasten the door between the kitchen and the scullery. But the pantry was empty. Every scrap of food had gone. Apparently, the Martian had taken it all on the previous day. At that discovery, I despaired for the first time. I took no food, or no drink either, on the 11th or the 12th day. I'd be really hungry by then. At my first mouth and throat were parched, and my strength ebbed sensibly. I sat about in the darkness of the scullery in a state of despondent wretchedness. My mind ran on eating. I thought I had become deaf, for the noises of movement I had been accustomed to here from the pit had ceased absolutely. I did not feel strong enough to crawl noiselessly to the peephole, or I would have gone there. On the 12th day, my throat was so painful that, taking the chance of alarming the Martians, I attacked the creaking rainwater pump that stood by the sink and got a couple of glassfuls of blackened and tainted rainwater. I was greatly refreshed by this, and emboldened by the fact that no inquiring tentacle followed the noise of my pumping. During these days, in a rambling, inconclusive way, I thought much of the curate and of the manner of his death. On the 13th day, I drank some more water, and dozed and thought disjointedly of eating and of vague, impossible plans of escape. Whenever I dozed, I dreamt of horrible phantasms. Phantasms. The word choice in this book sometimes is astounding. I dreamt of horrible phantasmas, of death of the curate, or of sumptuous dinners, but, asleep or awake, I felt a keen pain that urged me to drink again and again. The light that came into the scullery was no longer grey but red. To my disordered imagination it seemed the color of blood. On the 14th day I went into the kitchen, and I was surprised to find that the fronds of the red weed had grown right across the hole in the wall, turning the half-light of the place into a crimson-colored obscurity. It was early on the 15th day that I heard a curious, familiar sequence of sounds in the kitchen, and, listening, identified it as the snuffing and scratching of a dog. Going into the kitchen, I saw a dog's nose peering in through a break among the ruddy fronds. This greatly surprised me. At the scent of me, he barked shortly. I thought if I could induce him to come into the place quietly, I should be able to, perhaps, to kill and eat him. And in any case, it would be advisable to kill him, lest his actions attracted the attention of the Martians. I crept forward, saying, "Good dog," very softly, but he suddenly withdrew his head and disappeared. I listened. I was not deaf, but certainly the pit was still. I heard a sound like the flutter of a bird's wings and a horse croaking, but that was all. For a long while I lay close to the peephole, but not daring to move aside the red plants that obscured it. Once or twice I heard a faint pitter-patter like the feet of the dog going hither and thither on the sand far below me, and there were more like bird-like sounds, but that was all. At length, encouraged by the silence, I looked out. Except in the corner where a multitude of crows hopped and fought over the skeletons of the dead the Martians had consumed, there was not a living thing in the pit. I stared about me, scarcely believing my eyes. All the machinery had gone, save for the big mound of grayish-blue powder in one corner, certain bars of aluminum in another, the blackbirds, and the skeletons of the killed. The place was merely an empty circular pit in the sand. Slowly, I thrust myself out through the red weed and stood upon the mound of rubble. I could see in any direction save behind me, to the north, and neither Martians nor sign of Martians were to be seen. The pit dropped sheerly from my feet, but a little way along the rubbish afforded a practicable slope to the summit of the ruins. My chance of escape had come. I began to tremble. I hesitated for some time, and then, in a gust of desperate resolution, and with a heart that throbbed violently, I scrambled to the top of the mound in which I had been buried so long. I looked about again. To the northward, too, no Martian was visible. When I had last seen this part of the sheen in the daylight, it had been a straggling street of comfortable white and red houses, interspersed with abundant shady trees. Now I stood on a mound of smashed brickwork, clay, and gravel, over which spread a multitude of red cactus-shaped plants, knee-high, with a solitary terrestrial growth to dispute their footing. The trees near me were dead and brown, but further a network of red thread sealed the living stems. The neighboring houses had all been wrecked, but none had been burned. Their walls stood, sometimes to the second story, with smashed windows and shattered doors. The red weed grew tumultuously in their roofless rooms. Below me was the great pit, with the other crows struggling for its refuse. A number of other birds hopped about among the ruins. Far away I saw a gaunt cat slink crouchingly along a wall, but traces of men were none. The day seemed, by contrast with my recent confinement, dazzlingly bright, the sky a glowing blue. A scrap of unoccupied ground gently swaying, and oh, the sweetness of the air. And that was a very quick chapter 5. This is basically recalling a few days that he spent coming to his senses and trying to grasp life within himself, and then finally daring to go outside, only to find nothing. Nothing but ruin and death. Soothing voice while cooking nice. Thank you. That is why I'm here. Let us continue with Chapter 6. Do you get tired reading out loud for 2 hours? Goldie, hello. No, not really. I used to. When I first started, I would get drained, but now I think I've built up a stamina. So yeah, it doesn't get too bad, especially if it's a good story. And this one has been very intriguing, so I'm glad I picked it out. I would need a nap. Yeah, it can feel like that. But that's also why I'm here, to help all of you relax. Catch a few Pokemon, hopefully. Play a little Stream Raiders for the fun of it. And in the meantime, just hang out and chill. Thank you for that epic Centurion. Chapter 6. The Work of 15 Days. For some time I stood tottering on the mound, regardless of my safety. Within that noisome den from which I had emerged, I had thought with a narrow intensity only of our immediate security. I had not realized what had been happening to the world, had not anticipated this startling vision of unfamiliar things. I had expected to see sheen in ruins. I found about me the landscape, weird and lurid, of another planet. For that moment I touched an emotion beyond the common range of men, yet one that the poor brutes we dominate know only too well. I felt as a rabbit might feel returning to his burrow and suddenly confronted by the work of a dozen busy navvies digging the foundations of a house. I felt the first inkling of a thing that presently grew quite clear in my mind, that oppressed me for many days, a sense of dethronement. That's I can't say I know what that word is, to be honest. Dethronement. Yeah. A persuasion that I was no longer a master, but an animal among the animals, under the Martian heel. I have a feeling it's something to do with, like, being enslaved or feeling loss of control, perhaps, but I'd have to look it up. With us it would be as with them, to lurk and watch, to run and hide. The fear and empire of man had passed away. Yes, it's that dethronement. Yeah, dethronement. I guess I was just reading it wrong. Oh, that's funny. But thank you, Skunk. Yes, dethronement. That makes much more sense now than dethronement. Good one. Okay. But so soon as the strangeness had been realized, it passed, and my dominant motive became the hunger of my long and dismal fast. In the direction away from the pit, I saw, beyond a red-covered wall, a patch of garden ground unburied. This gave me a hint, and I went knee-deep and sometimes neck-deep in the red weed. The density of the weed gave me a reassuring sense of hiding. This wall was some 6 feet high, and when I attempted to clamber it, I found I could not lift my feet to the crest. So I went along by the side of it, and came to a corner and a rockwork that enabled me to get on the top, and tumble into the garden I coveted. Here I found some young onions, a couple of gladiolus bulbs, and a quantity of immature carrots, all of which I secured, and, scrambling over a ruined wall, went on my way through scarlet and crimson trees towards Kew. That's Kew. It was like walking through an avenue of gigantic blood drops, possessed with two ideas, to get more food and to limp, as soon and as far as my strength permitted, out of this accursed, unearthly region of the pit. Some way farther, in a grassy place, was a group of mushrooms which also I devoured, and then I came upon a brown sheet of flowing shallow water, where meadows used to be. These fragments of nourishment
Don't look now, Atkinson, but you have someone new following you.
Ah, Gemma15, hello, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Sit back and relax. These fragments of nourishment served only to whet my hunger. At first I was surprised at this flood in a hot, dry summer, but afterwards I discovered that it was caused by the tropical exuberance of the red weed. Directly this extraordinary growth encountered water, it straightway became gigantic and unparalleled fecundity. I thought I had been following. Oh, that's alright. Yes, that alert was recorded by my moderator, who, side note, I will be hosting his stream later on at 7 p.m. tonight as Aaron Smith Audio, myself, along with Aaron Alkendi and Jubilee OBI will be doing a virtual escape room. So if you like that kind of thing, feel free to come back to my stream as I'll be hosting. And Stunt Mama, hello, welcome in. Listening while I play Devour. Interesting combination. Very interesting combination. Its seeds were simply poured down into the water of the Wey and Thames, and its swiftly growing and titanic water fawns speedily choked both those rivers. At Putney, as I afterwards saw, the bridge was almost lost in a tangle of this weed, and at Richmond too, the Thames water poured in a broad and shallow stream across the meadows of Hampton and Twickenham. And drink. Exactly, soothing while you get chased. As the waters spread, the weed followed them, until the ruined villas of the Thames Valley were for a time lost in this red swamp, whose margin I explored, and much of the desolation the Martians had caused was concealed. So I'm imagining in all of these places this red vine, which I guess you would often see in like horror-based games like Back 4 Blood and stuff like that, and it's just completely enveloped everything it touches, and he's trying to basically move through it all and understand what it is and how it is, and obviously trying to find food in the process. So it's very interesting. In the end, the red weed succumbed almost as quickly as it had spread. A cankering disease due, is believed, to the action of certain bacteria presently seized upon it. Now, by the action of natural selection, all terrestrial plants have acquired a resisting power against bacterial diseases. They never succumb without a severe struggle, but the red weed rotted like a thing already dead. The fronds became bleached, and then shriveled and brittle. They broke off at the least touch, and the waters that had stimulated their early growth carried their last vestiges out to sea. My first action coming to this water was, of course, to slake my thirst. I drank a great deal of it, and, moved by an impulse, gnawed some fronds of red weed. But they were watery and had a sickly, metallic taste. He must be desperate if he's trying to, I keep saying Thames, it is Thames. He must be quite desperate to eat the red weed. Yeah, I've been saying Thames this whole time, and in my head I know it's Thames, but I can't stop myself from saying Thames. But I will try. Again. Let's see, where was I? I completely lost my place. I found the water was sufficiently shallow for me to wade securely, although the red weed impeded my feet a little. But the flood evidently got deeper towards the river, and I turned back to Mortlake. I managed to make out the road by means of occasional ruins of its villas and fences and lamps, and so presently I got out of this spate and made my way to the hill going up towards Roehampton, and came out on Putney Common. You like dystopian literature? I think, yeah, I do, because I've written a couple of books that kind of go in that direction. And I have a few more that are coming up that seem not dystopian, but at least on the cusp. You're reading one now? Awesome. Here the scenery changed from the strange and unfamiliar to the wreckage of the familiar. Patches of ground exhibited the devastation of a cyclone, and in a few score yards I would come upon perfectly undisturbed spaces, houses with their blinds trimly drawn and doors closed, as if they had been left for a day by the owners, or as if their inhabitants slept within. The red weed was less abundant. The tall trees along the lane were free from the red creeper. I hunted for food among the trees, finding nothing. And I also raided a couple of silent houses, but they had already been broken into and ransacked. I rested for the remainder of the daylight in a shrubbery, being, in my enfeebled condition, too fatigued to push on. Why would he rest in shrubbery when there's houses that are abandoned that would provide, shelter from wind and rain? Just curious. All this time I saw no human beings, and no signs of the Martians. I encountered a couple of hungry-looking dogs, but both hurried circuitously away from the advances I made them. Near Roehampton I had seen 2 human skeletons, not bodies, but skeletons, picked clean. And in the wood by me I found the crushed and scattered bones of several cats and rabbits and the skull of a sheep. But though I gnawed parts of these in my mouth, there was nothing to be got from them. After sunset I struggled on along the road towards Putney, where I think the heat ray must have been used for some reason. And in the garden beyond Roehampton I got a quantity of immature potatoes, sufficient to stay my hunger. From this garden one looked down upon Putney and the river. The aspect of the place in the dusk was singularly desolate. Blackened trees, blackened desolate ruins, and down the hill the sheets of the flooded river, red-tinged with the weed. And over all, silence. It filled me with indescribable terror to think how swiftly that desolating change had come. For a time I believed that mankind had been swept out of existence, and that I stood there alone, the last man left alive. Hard by the top of Putney Hill, I came upon another skeleton, with the arms dislocated and removed several yards from the rest of the body. As I proceeded, I became more and more convinced that the extermination of mankind was, save for such stragglers as myself, already accomplished in this part of the world. The Martians, I thought, had gone on and left the country desolated, seeking food elsewhere. Perhaps even now they were destroying Berlin or Paris, or it might be that they have gone northward. And that is Chapter 6. Indeed. What else did I miss? Have you heard of the podcast Within the Wires? No, I cannot say I have. Let's see. I'm on and Lang, but I think I might try to merge with the rest of y'all. Pre-Apocalyptic is my novel, which is coming up. Ooh, okay. Gemma, I'm not sure what you mean by the, and Lang. Not sure about that one. Tidy skeletons, then. Neat, orderly skeletons. Yes. No one else is still playing there, or you're just left alone for the moment? Dystopian mystery, future, past, alternate, present. Uh-oh. So, I must have... I think I turned on a setting to where, you know, accounts need to be authorized. And Tig Madison tried coming in and talking, but even though she already has a verified phone number, it's not letting her in. So, you know, that's a thing. Let me just check something real quick, since we're coming up to the stream rater anyway. Where did I do that? I gotta remember where I put in those types of settings, or upgraded the settings, I should say. Because I don't really have that problem where, you know, people are coming in and harassing me, or at least not yet. Gosh darn it, where did I do that? I thought it was in the settings section, but I cannot find it. Happened to me the other day too, yeah. I changed a setting somewhere. That much I know. Let's see, we have a minute left on Stream Raiders. So let me just put that up to be able to look at while I try to find where I changed the settings. Because gosh darn it, I don't want people to feel like they're getting left out if they're trying to get in here. That's not cool with me. It's not cool with me at all. Although I wonder if I cannot change... Ah, I found it. I found it. I turned it off. The phone part is off. Hopefully that makes a difference. Yeah. Okay. Alright, let's see. How are we doing on the Stream Raider battle? We've got about 20 seconds left. Let me do a quick refresh. Okay. This will be interesting. Let's see, I gotta figure out what kind of booster we're gonna use. Alright, battle's ready. Got a decent amount of archers, so that's great. I think what we'll do is we'll curse these guys right here, because they're going to be the first ones to get hit. Good luck. And after this, we'll get back into our reading. Uh-oh, they're splitting up. Where's the music? The music disappeared. Why are we splitting up? Don't split up. Oh dear. Good luck, Skunk. You got this. He's going in. So far, so good. All of our other troops over here just taking their time. Queen's Archer back here, picking them off. Oh no, that's too many. Queen's Archer's down. What are we gonna do? It's alright, the victory is ours. There's only 5 enemies left. Well fought and well deserved. Good job. Well done. Alright. We got some healer scrolls and we got some flying rogue scrolls. Skunk and David on the air. Good job. We did it. We did it. Alright. Let's just keep rolling. Holy buckets. What do we got here? Some level 5, some level 1s. Yeah, this is a warrior map for sure. So we are gonna need a lot of melee. Of course, we need a bit of defense in the front. And then beyond that, feel free to place whatever you want. Definitely need some melee though, for sure. Stupid units need a compass or something. Yeah, right. Okay. How are we doing? Is everyone ready? We ready to carry on and continue with our adventure? Let me open up the book. Drop my bookmark. Oh, if you were here for the welcome screen, you would have seen it, but just in case you were not, don't forget our book month is coming up. Our discussion for that, October 30th. Neil Gaiman's Coraline. If you are a sub in my channel, I am reading it in Discord every Saturday, leading up to the book club. So definitely put that on your calendar. That's going to be, I read that at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. Okay, Now I'm Listening More was playing with the guy I like. We'll just keep that between you and I, Queen. And the other people here. So yes, if you're interested in the book club, there'll be a whole bunch of us. If you want to know more, you can always hop in my Discord. Not that kind of, well, I didn't mean that. I just meant it was a guy that you like. I didn't mean you were Queen. Come on. This is a family rated show, okay? Okay. But thank you for clarifying. Anyway, in the panels below, you will see a whole bunch of USG, United Storytellers Group members. They all read at some time or another. They're all fantastic people. Feel free to check them out. Not everyone will be at the book club this time around, but definitely stay tuned and give them a look if you want to hear more reading from other people. I'm glad I can write here again. Me too. Me too. Alright, let's continue with Chapter 7, after I cough. Okay. Just had to clear my throat. The Man on Putney Hill. I spent that night in the inn that stands at the top of Putney Hill, sleeping in a made bed for the first time since my flight to Leatherhead. I will not tell the needless trouble I had breaking into that house. Afterwards, I found the front door was on the latch, nor how I ransacked every room for food until just on the verge of despair, in what seemed to be a servant's bedroom. I found a rat-gnawed crust and 2 tins of pineapple. The place had already been searched, and it's emptied. Hold on. You know that feeling like you're gonna sneeze, but then you don't? I hate that feeling. In the bar, I afterwards found some biscuits and sandwiches that had been overlooked. The latter I could not eat. They were too rotten. But the former not only stayed my hunger, but filled my pockets. I lit no lamps, fearing some Martian might come beating that part of London for food in the night. Before I went to bed, I had an interval of restlessness, and prowled from window to window, peering out for some sign of these monsters. I slept little. As I lay in bed, I found myself thinking consecutively, a thing I do not remember to have done since my last argument with the curate. During all the intervening time, my mental condition had been a hurrying succession of vague emotional states, or a sort of stupid receptivity. But in the night my brain, reinforced, I suppose, by the food I had eaten, grew clear again. And I thought. 3 things struggled for possession of my mind: the killing of the curate, the whereabouts of the Martians, and the possible fate of my wife. The former gave me no sensation of horror or remorse to recall. I saw it simply as a thing done, a memory infinitely disagreeable but quite without the quantity of remorse. I saw myself then as I see myself now, driven step by step towards that hasty blow, the creature of a sequence of accidents leading inevitably to that. I felt no condemnation, yet the memory, static, unprogressive, haunted me. In the silence of the night, with that sense of the nearness of God that sometimes comes into the stillness and the darkness, I stood my trial, my only trial, for that moment of wrath and fear. I retraced every step of our conversation from the moment when I had found him crouching beside me, heedless of my thirst, and pointing to the fire and smoke that steamed up from the ruins of Weybridge. We had been incapable of cooperation. Grim chance had taken no heed of that. Had I foreseen, I should have left him at Halliford. But I had not foresee, and crime is to foresee and do. And I set this down as I have set all to the story down, as it was. There were no witnesses. All these things I might have concealed, but I set it down, and the reader must form his judgment as he will. So this is kind of like his penance, getting it off his chest and saying, take my guilt, it is as it is. You do with it what you want. And when, by an effort, I had set aside that picture of a prostrate body, I faced the problem of the Martians and the fate of my wife. For the former I had no data. I could imagine 100 things, and so, unhappily, I could for the latter. And suddenly that night became terrible. I found myself sitting up in bed, staring at the dark. I found myself praying that the heat ray might have suddenly and painlessly struck her out of being. Since the night of my return from Leatherhead, I had not prayed. I had uttered prayers, fetish prayers, had prayed as heathens mutter charms when I was in extremity, but now I prayed indeed, pleading steadfastly and sanely, face to face with the darkness of God. Strange night. Strange in this that I so soon as dawn had come, I, who talked with God, crept out of the house like a rat leaving its hiding place. A creature scarcely larger, an inferior animal, a thing that for any passing whim of our masters might be hunted and killed. Perhaps they also prayed confidently to God. Surely, if we had learned nothing else, this war has taught us pity. Pity for those witless souls that suffer our dominion. The morning was bright and fine, and the eastern sky glowed pink, and was fretted with little golden clouds. In the road that runs from the top of Putney Hill to Wimbledon was a number of poor vestiges of the panic torrent that must have poured Londonward on the Sunday night after the fighting began. There was a little two-wheeled cart inscribed with the name of Thomas Lobb, greengrocer, New Malden. with a smashed wheel and an abandoned tin trunk. There was a straw hat trampled into the now hardened mud, and at the top of West Hill a lot of blood-stained glass about the overturned water trough. My movements were languid, my plans of the vaguest. I had an idea of going to Leatherhead, though I knew that there I had the poorest chance of finding my wife. Certainly, unless death had overtaken them suddenly, my cousins and she would have fled thence, but it seemed to me I might find or learn there whither the Surrey people had fled. I knew I wanted to find my wife, that my heart ached for her and the world of men, but I had no clear idea how the finding might be done. I was also sharply aware now of my intense loneliness. From the corner I went, under the cover of thicket of trees and bushes, to the edge of Wimbledon Common, stretching wide and far. The dark expanse was lit in patches by yellow gorse and broom. There was no red weed to be seen, and as I prowled, hesitating, on the verge of the open, and the sun rose, flooding it all with light and vitality, I came upon a busy swarm of little frogs in a swampy place among the trees. I stopped to look at them, drawing a lesson from their stout resolve to live, and presently, turning suddenly with an odd feeling of being watched, I beheld something crouching amid a clump of bushes. I stood regarding this. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with a cutlass. I approached him slowly. He stood silent and motionless, regarding me. As I drew nearer, I perceived he was dressed in clothes as dusty and filthy as my own. He looked indeed as though he had been dragged through a culvert. Nearer, I distinguished the green slime of ditches mixing with the pale drab of dried clay and shiny coaly patches. His black hair fell over his eyes, and his face was dark and dirty and sunken, so that at first I did not recognize him. There was a red cut across the lower part of his face. "Stop!" he cried when I was within 10 yards of him, and I stopped. His voice was hoarse. "Where do you come from?" he said. I thought, surveying him. "I came from Mortlake," I said. "I was buried near the pit the Martians made about their cylinder. I have worked my way out and escaped." "There's no food about here," he said. "This is my country. All this hill down to the river and back to Clapham, and up to the edge of the common. There's only food for one. Which way are you going?" I answered slowly. "I don't know," I said. "I have been buried in the ruins of a house 13 or 14 days. I don't know what has happened." He looked at me doubtfully, then started, and looked with a changed expression. "I have no wish to stop about here," said I. Wrong voice. "I've no wish to stop about here," said I. "I think I shall go to Leatherhead, for my wife was there." He shot out, pointing a finger. "It is you," said he, "the man from Woking, and you weren't killed at Weybridge." I recognized him at the same moment. "You are the artilleryman who came into my garden." "Good luck," he said. "We are the lucky ones. Fancy you." He put out a hand, and I took it. I crawled up a drain, he said, "but they didn't kill everyone. And after that they went their way, and I got off towards Walton across the fields. But it's not 16 days altogether, and your hair is grey." He looked over his shoulder suddenly. "Only a rook," he said. "One gets to know that birds have shadows these days. This is a bit open. Let us crawl under those bushes and talk." "Have you seen the Martians?" I said. "Since I crawled out." "They've gone away across London," he said. "I guess they've got a bigger camp there. Of a night, all over there, Hampstead way, the sky is alive with their lights. It's like a great city, and in the glare you can just see them moving. By daylight you can't, but near I haven't seen them." He counted on his fingers. 5 days. Then I saw a couple across Hammersmith Way carrying something big. And the night before last." He stopped and spoke impressively. "It was just a matter of lights, but it was something up in the air. I believe they built a flying machine and are learning to fly." I stopped on hands and knees, for we had come to the bushes. "Fly? Yes," he said, "fly." I went on into a little bower and sat down. "It's all over with humanity," I said. "If they can do that, they will simply go round the world." He nodded. "They will, but it will relieve things over here a bit, and besides," he looked at me, "aren't you satisfied it is up with humanity? I am. We're down. We're beat." I stared. Strange as it may seem, I had not arrived at this fact, a fact perfectly obvious so soon as he spoke. I had still held a vague hope, rather I had kept a lifelong habit of mind. He repeated his words. "We're beat." They carried absolute conviction. "It's all over," he said. "They've lost one, just one, and they've made their footing good and crippled the greatest power in the world. They've walked all over us. The death of that one at Weybridge was an accident, and these are only pioneers. They kept on coming. These green stars, I've seen these 5 or 6 days, but I've no doubt they're falling somewhere every night. Nothing's to be done. We're under. We're beat." I made him no answer. I sat staring before me, trying in vain to devise some countervailing thought. "This isn't a war," said the artilleryman. "It never was a war, any more than there's been war between man and ants." Suddenly I recalled the night in the observatory. After the 10th night, they fired no more, at least until the first cylinder came. "How do you know?" said the artilleryman. I explained, and he thought. "Something wrong with the gun," he said. "But what if there is? They'll get it right again, and then if there's a delay, how can it alter the end? It's just men and ants. There's the ants builds their cities, live their lives, have wars, revolutions, until the men want them out of the way, and then they go out of the way. That's just what we are now, just ants. Only..." "Yes," I said. "We're eatable ants." We sat looking at each other. "And what will they do with us?" I said. "That's all I've been thinking," he said. "That's what I've been thinking. After Weybridge, I went south. Thinking. I saw what was up. Most of the people were hard at it, squealing and exciting themselves. But I'm not so fond of squealing. I've been inside of death once or twice. I'm not an ornamental soldier, and the best and the worst. Death, it's just death. And it's the man that keeps on thinking comes through. I saw everyone tracking away south. Says I, food won't last this way. I turned right back. I went for the Martians like a sparrow goes for man. All round." He waved a hand to the horizon. "They're starving in heaps, bolting, treading on each other." He saw my face and halted awkwardly. "No doubts lots who had money have gone away to France," he said. He seemed to hesitate whether to apologize, met my eyes and went on. "There's food all about here, canned things in shops, wines, spirits, mineral waters, and the water mains and drains are empty. Well, I was telling you what I was thinking. Here's intelligent things," I said. "It seems they want us for food. First they'll smash us up. Ships, machines, guns, cities, all the order of organization, and that will go. If we were the size of ants, we might pull through, but we're not. It's all too bulky to stop. That's the first certainty, eh? I assented. It is. I've thought it out. Very well then. Next at present we're caught as we're wanted. A Martian has only to go a few miles to get crowded on the run. And I saw one day, out by Wandsworth, picking houses to pieces and rooting them on the wreckage. But they won't keep on doing that. So soon as they've settled all our guns and ships and smashed over our railways and done all the things they're doing over there, they will begin catching us systematic, picking up the best and storing us in cages and things. That's what they'll start doing in a bit. Lord, they haven't begun on us yet. Don't you see that? Not begun, I exclaimed. Not begun. All that's happened so far is through our not having the sense to keep quiet, worrying them with the guns and such foolery, and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds to where there wasn't any more safety than where we were. They don't want to bother us yet. They're making their things, making all the things they couldn't bring with them, getting things ready for the rest of their people. Very likely that's why the cylinders have stopped for a bit, for fear of hitting those who are here. And instead of our rushing about blind on the howl or getting dynamite on the chance of busting them up, we've got to fix ourselves up according to the new state of affairs. That's how I figure it out. It isn't quite according to what a man's wants for his species, but it's about what the facts point to. And that's the principle I acted upon. Cities, nations, civilization, progress, it's all over. The game's up. We're beat. But is that so? What is there to live for? The artilleryman looked at me for a moment. There won't be any more blessed concerts for 1,000,000 years or so. There won't be any Royal Academy of Arts, and no nice little feeds at restaurants. If it is amusement you're after, I reckon the game is up. If you've got any drawing room manners or a dislike to eating peas with a knife or dropping H's, you better chuck 'em away. They ain't no further use. You mean? I mean that men like me are going on living for the sake of the breed. I tell you, I'm grim set on living. And if I'm not mistaken, you'll show what's inside you've got too before long. We aren't going to be exterminated. And I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like a thundering ox. Ugh, fancy those brown creepers. You don't mean to say, I do. And I'm going on, under their feet. I've got it planned. I've thought it out. We men are beat. We don't know enough. We've got to learn before we've got a chance. And we've got to live and keep independent while we learn, see? That's what has to be done. I stared, astonished, and stirred profoundly by the man's resolution. Great God, cried I. But you are a man indeed. And suddenly I gripped his hand. Eh? He said, with his eyes shining. I've thought about it, eh? Well, go on, I said. Well, those who mean to escape their catching must get ready. I'm getting ready. Mind you, it isn't all of us that are made for wild beasts, and that's what it's got to be. That's why I watched you. I had my doubts. You're slender. I didn't know that it was you see, or just how you'd been buried. All these, the sort of people that lived in these houses and all that damn little clerks that used to live down that way, they'd be no good. They haven't any spirit in them, no proud dreams and no proud lusts, and a man who hasn't come out for the other. Lord, what is he to be funk and precautions? They just used to skedaddle off to work. I've seen hundreds of them, bit of a break fast in hand, running wild and shining to catch their little season ticket train, for fear they'd get dismissed if they didn't, working at businesses that they were afraid to take the trouble to understand, skedaddling back for fear they wouldn't be in time for dinner, keeping indoors after dinner for fear of the back streets, and the sleeping with the wives they married, not because they wanted them, but because they had a bit of money that would make for safety in their one little miserable skedaddle through the world. Lives insured and a bit invested for fear of accidents, and on Sundays, fear of the hereafter, as if hell was built for rabbits. Well, the Martians will just be a godsend to these. Nice roomy cages, fattening food, careful breeding, no worry. After a week or so chasing about the fields and lands on empty stomachs, they'll come and be caught cheerful. They'll be quite glad after a bit. They'll wonder what people did before there were Martians to take care of them. And the bar loafers and mashers and singers, I can imagine them. He said with a sort of somber gratification. There'll be any amount of sentiment and religion loose among them. There's hundreds of things I saw with my eyes that I've only begun to see clearly these last few days. There's lots will take things as they are, fat and stupid, and lots will be worried by a sort of feeling that it's all wrong, and that they ought to be something. Now, whenever things are so that a lot of people feel they ought to be doing something, the weak and those who go weak with a lot of complicated thinking always make for a sort of do-nothing religion, very pious and superior, and submit persecution to the will of the Lord. Very likely you've seen the same thing. It's energy in a gale of funk, and turned clean inside out. These cages will be full of psalms and hymns and piety, and those of a less simple sort will work in a bit of, what is it? Eroticism? He paused. Okay, wow, that was a lot of speech. Good. That was like literally a page with no paragraphs. It was just straight text. It was ridiculous. I'll show you of how ridiculous it was. Check this out. Just straight, like, easy to lose your place. That was crazy. Anyway, carrying on. He paused. Very likely these Martians will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks. Who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. And some, maybe, they will train to hunt us. No, I cried. That's impossible. No human being. What's the good of going on with such lies? Said the artilleryman. There's men who do it cheerful. What nonsense to pretend there isn't. And I succumbed to his conviction. If they come after me, he said, Lord, if they come after me, and subsided into a grim meditation. I sat contemplating these things. I could find nothing to bring against this man's reasoning. In the days before the invasion, no one would have questioned my intellectual superiority to his. I, a professed and recognized writer on philosophical themes, and he, a common soldier, and yet he had already formulated a situation that I had scarcely realized. What are you doing? I said presently. What plans have you made? He hesitated. Well, it's like this, he said. What have we to do? We have to invent a sort of life where men can live and breed and be sufficiently secure to bring children up. Yes, wait a bit, and I'll make clearer that I think it ought to be done. The tame ones will go like all tame beasts. In a few generations, they'll be big, beautiful, rich, blooded, stupid rubbish. The risk is that we who keep wild will go savage, degenerate into a sort of big, savage rat. You see, how I mean to live is underground. I've been thinking about the drains. Of course, those who don't know drains think horrible things, but under this London are miles and miles, hundreds of miles, and a few days' rain and London empty will leave them sweet and clean. The main drains are big enough and airy enough for anyone. Then there's cellars, vaults, stores, from which bolting passages may be made to the drains, and the railway tunnels and subways. You begin to see? And we form a band, able-bodied, clean-minded men. We're not going to pick up any rubbish that drifts in. Weaklings go out again. As you meant me to go. Well, I parlayed, didn't I? We won't quarrel about that. Go on. Those who stop obey orders. Able-bodied, clean-minded women we want also. Mothers and teachers. No lackadaisical ladies. No blasted rolling eyes. We can't have any weak or silly. Life is real again. And the useless and cumbersome and the mischievous have to die. They ought to die. They ought to be willing to die. It's a sort of disloyalty, after all, to live and taint the race. And they can't be happy. Moreover, dying is none so dreadful. It's the funking makes it bad. And in all those places we shall gather, our district will be London. And we may even be able to keep a watch and run about in the open when the Martians keep away. Play cricket, perhaps. That's how we shall save the race. It's a possible thing. But saving the race is nothing in itself. As I say, that's only being rats. It's saving our knowledge and adding it to it, it's the thing. There men like you come in. There's books. There's models. We must make great, safe places down deep, and we get all the books we can. Not novels and poetry, swipes, but ideas. Science books. That's where men like you come in. We must go to the British Museum and pick all those books through. Especially we must keep our science and learn more. We must watch these Martians. Some of us must go as spies. When it's all working, perhaps I will. Get caught, I mean. And the great thing is, we must leave the Martians alone. We mustn't even steal. If we get in their way, we clear out. We must show them we mean no harm. Yes, I know. But they're intelligent things, and they won't hunt us down if they have all they want, and think that we're just harmless vermin. The artilleryman paused and laid a brown hand upon my arm. After all, it may not be so much me we have to learn before. That was a strange sentence. We may not have to learn before. Anyway, just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their fighting machines suddenly starting off, heat rays right and left, and not a Martian in 'em. Not a Martian in 'em, but men who have learned the way how. It may be in my time, even those men. Fancy having one of them lovely things with its heat ray wide and free. Fancy having it in control. What would it matter if you smashed to smithereens at the end of the run after a bus like that? I reckon the Martians will open up their beautiful eyes. Can't you see them, man? Can't you see them hurrying and puffing and blowing and hooting to their other mechanical affairs? Something out of the eager in every case. And swish, bang, rattle, swish. Just as they were fumbling over it, swish comes the heat ray, and behold, man has come back to his own. For a while the imaginative daring of the artilleryman and the tone of assurance and courage he assumed completely dominated my mind. I believed unhesitatingly both in his forecast of human destiny and in the practicality of his astonishing scheme, and the reader who thinks me susceptible and foolish must contrast his position, reading steadily with all his thoughts about his subject and mine, crouching fearfully in the bushes and listening, distracted by apprehension. We talked in this manner through the early morning time, and later crept out of the bushes, and after scanning the sky for Martians, hurried precipitately to the house of Putney Hill where he had made his lair. It was the coal cellar of the place, and when I saw the work he had spent a week upon, it was a burrow scarcely 10 yards long, which he designed to reach the main drain of Putney Hill. I had my first inkling of the gulf between his dreams and his powers. Such a hole I could have dug in a day, but I believed in him sufficiently to work with him all the morning until past midday at his digging. We had a garden barrow and shot the earth we removed against the kitchen range. We refreshed ourselves with a tin of mock turtle soup and wine for some neighboring pantry. I found a curious relief from the aching strangeness of the world in this steady labor. As we worked, I turned his project over in my mind, and presently objections and doubts began to arise. But I worked there all the morning, so glad was I to find myself with a purpose again. After working an hour, I began to speculate on the distance one had to go before the cloaca was reached, the chances we had of missing it altogether. My immediate trouble was why we should dig this long tunnel, when it was possible to get into the drain at once down one of the manholes and work back to the house. It seemed to me, too, that the house was inconveniently chosen and required a needless length of tunnel. And just as I was beginning to face these things, the artilleryman stopped digging and looked at me. "We're working well," he said. He put down his spade. "Let us knock off a bit," he said. "I think it is time we recontorted from the roof of the house." I was for going on, and after a little hesitation, he resumed his spade, and then suddenly I was struck by a thought. I stopped, and so did he at once. "Why were you talking about the common," I said, "instead of being here?" "Taking the air," he said. "I was coming back. It's safer by night." "But the work?" "Oh, one can't always work," he said, and in a flash I saw the man plain. He hesitated, holding his spade. "We ought to cannot speak today. We ought to reconnoitre? Yeah, we ought to reconnoitre now," he said. "Because if any come near, they may hear the spades and drop upon us unawares." I was no longer disposed to object. We went together to the roof and stood on a ladder peeping out of the roof door. No Martians were to be seen, and we ventured out on the tiles and slipped down under the shelter of the parapet. From this position a shrubbery hid the greater portion of Putney, but we could see the river below, a bubbly mass of red weed, and the lower part of Lambeth flooded and red. The red creeper swarmed up the trees about the old palace, and their branches stretched gaunt and dead, and set with shriveled leaves from amid its clusters. It was strange how entirely dependent both these things were on flowing water for their propagation. About us neither had gained a footing. Laburnums, pink maize, snowballs, and trees of arborvite rose out of laurels and hydrangeas, green and brilliant into the sunlight. Beyond Kensington, dense smoke was rising, and that and a blue haze hid the northward hills. The artilleryman began to tell me of some sort of people who still remained in London. Reconnoitre, it's a weird pronunciation, means meet up. Yeah, I figured it meant meet up, I had never come across that word before. But this was written, not exactly yesterday. Reconnoitre. Thank you. "One night last week," he said, "some fools got the electric light in order, and there was all Regent Street and the circus ablaze, crowded with painted and ragged drunkards, men and women dancing and shouting till dawn. A man who was there told me, and as the day came, they became aware of a fighting machine standing near by the Langham, and looking down at them. Heaven knows how long he had been there. It must have given him some... Wow, let's try that again. It must have given some of them a nasty turn. He came down the road towards them and picked up nearly 100 too drunk or frightened to run away. Grotesque gleam of a might no history will ever fully describe. From that, and in answer to my questions, he came round to his grandiose plans again. He grew enthusiastic. He talked so eloquently of the possibility of capturing a fighting machine that I more than half believed in him again. But now I was beginning to understand something of his quality. I could divine the stress he laid on nothing precipitately, and I noted now that there was no question that he personally was to capture the fight the great machine. After a time we went down to the cellar. Neither of us seemed disposed to resume digging, and when he suggested a meal, I was nothing loath. He became suddenly very generous, and when he had eaten, he went away and returned with some excellent cigars. We lit these, and his optimism glowed. He was inclined to regard my coming as a great occasion. "There's some champagne in the cellar," he said. "We can dig better on this Thames side, Burgundy." No, wrong voice, sorry. "We can dig better on the Thames side, Burgundy," said I. "No," said he. "I am a host today. Champagne. Great God. We've a heavy enough task before us. Let us take a rest and gather strength while we may. Look at these blistered hands." And pursuant to this idea of a holiday, he insisted upon playing cards after we had eaten. He taught me euchre, and after dividing London between us, I taking the northern side and he the southern, we played for parish points. Grotesque and foolish as this will seem to the sober reader, it is absolutely true, and what is more remarkable, I found the card game and several others we played extremely interesting. Strange mind of man, that, with our species upon the edge of extermination, or appalling degradation, with no clear prospect before us but the chance of a horrible death, we could sit following the chance of this painted pasteboard, and playing the joker with vivid delight. Afterwards, he taught me poker, and I beat him at 3 tough chess games. When the dark game, we decided to take the risk, and lit a lamp. After an interminable string of games, we supped, and the artilleryman finished the champagne. We went on smoking the cigars. He was no longer the energetic regenerator of his species I had encountered in the morning. He was still optimistic, but it was less kinetic, a more thoughtful optimism. I remember he wound up with my health, proposed in a speech of small variety and considerable intermittence. I took a cigar, and went upstairs and looked at the lights of which he had spoken that blazed so greenly along the Highgate hills. At first, I stared unintelligently across the London valley. The northern hills were shrouded in darkness, the fires near Kensington glowed redly, and now and then an orange-red tongue of flame flashed up and vanished in the deep blue night. All the rest of London was black. Then, nearer, I perceived a strange light, a pale violet-purple fluorescent glow quivering under the night breeze. For a space I could not understand it, and then I knew that it must be the red weed, from which this faint irradiation proceeded. With that realization, my dormant sense of wonder, my sense of proportion of things, awoke again. I glanced from that to Mars, red and clear, glowing high in the west, and then gazed long and earnestly at the darkness of Hampstead and Highgate. I remained a very long time upon the roof, wondering at the grotesque changes of the day. I recalled my mental states from the midnight prayer to the foolish card-playing. I had a violent revulsion of feeling. I remembered I flung away the cigar with a certain wasteful symbolism. My folly came to me with glaring exaggeration. I seemed a traitor to my wife and to my kind. I was filled with remorse. I resolved to leave this strange, undisciplined dreamer of great things to his drink and gluttony, and to go on into London. There, it seemed to me, I had the best chance of learning what the Martians and my fellow men were doing. I was still upon the roof when the late moon rose. And that was a hefty Chapter 7. Whew. Man. That artilleryman sure talked a lot, didn't he? Alright. We are well overdue for our stream rate. Let me just give it a quick refresh. Alright. I'm going to give us the high ground here. And good luck. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Fight. And because we're in the purple, we won't move. Purple is like a defensive position. It's only until someone gets close enough that we will then strike. But thankfully, we've got some nice artillery here defending us. Taking out some units. There we go. While that battle's going on, I'm going to take a look at what we have here. Yeah, these next chapters aren't that long. And we're off. Go get him. We are just crushing them one by one. Victory. Good job, everybody. Well done. Well done indeed. Skunk and David on the air. Skunk gets the Barbarian Scrolls. David gets the 50 gold. Good job. I got a badge and some gold. Wonderful. Always need some gold. Alright. I think we can get at least one more in. So let's do it real quick. Let me just get it going here. What do we got going on here? Warriors, yes. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Some busters, some bombs will be good. Okay, I'm gonna put my Centurion right there. Get some melee in. Get some support units if you've got them. Those would be great. If you got any bombers, definitely place some bombs. And of course, feel free to place anything else that you want. And have at it. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. I'm enjoying immensely reading to you. We only have 3 chapters left before we start moving on to other books. And of course, adding a second streaming day, which I will release in my Discord. Feel free to type !Discord if you want to be in there so you can get that notification. If you want to be in the USG Discord, just type in !USGD. You will get the link for that as well. And in the meantime, let us carry on. Some audio clipping during your transition short. Ah, yes, that might be true. I will... Thank you for letting me know. I will try not to say anything when I'm switching between screens. I'm glad you like it, Queen. Yes. It is a favorite. Thank you, Hicks. It's cool though. Yeah, I like it. I also have now an introduction, a welcome video, so when I'm not streaming, if someone goes to my page, they will get a video, or if I'm not hosting anybody, they'll see a little intro video of me just saying hi and welcome. So that's fun too. Alright, let's carry on. Chapter 8, titled Dead London. After I had parted from the artilleryman, I went down the hill, by the high street across the bridge to Fulham. The red weed was tumultuous at the time, and nearly choked the bridge roadway, but its fronds were already whitened in patches by the spreading disease that presently removed it so swiftly. You've seen it. It's good. Thank you. Cool. I'm glad you like it. Because I'm not changing it. At least not for now. Maybe one day. At the corner of the lane that runs to Putney Bridge Station, I found a man lying. He was as black as sweep with the black dust, alive, but helplessly and speechlessly drunk. I could get nothing from him but curses and furious lunges at my head. I think I should have stayed by him but for the brutal expression of his face. There was black dust along the roadway from the bridge onwards, and it grew thicker in Fulham. The streets were horribly quiet. I got food, sour, hard, and moldy, but quite eatable, in a baker's shop here. Some way towards Walham Green the streets became clear of powder, and I passed a white terrace of houses on fire. The noise of the burning was an absolute relief. Going on towards Brompton, the streets were quiet again. Here I came once more upon the black powder in the streets, and upon dead bodies. I saw altogether about a dozen in the length of the Fulham Road. They had been dead many days, so that I hurried quickly past them. The black powder covered them over and softened their outlines. One or two had been disturbed by dogs. Where there was no black powder, it was curiously like a Sunday in the city with the closed shops, the houses locked up and the blinds drawn, the desertion and the stillness. In some places plunderers had been at work, but rarely at other than the provision and wine shops. A jeweler's window had been broken open in one place, but apparently the thief had been disturbed, and a number of gold chains and a watch lay scattered on the pavement. I did not trouble to touch them. Farther on was a tattered woman in a heap on a doorstep. The hand that hung over her knee was gashed and bled down her rusty brown dress, and a smashed magnum of champagne formed a pool across the pavement. She seemed asleep, but she was dead. Good evening, Maud Aaron Smith. Good to see you, sir. We are just on chapter 8, almost to the end. Very little left, so we have read much. The farther I penetrated into London, the profounder grew the stillness. But it was not so much the stillness of death, it was the stillness of suspense, of expectation. At any time the destruction that had already signed the northwestern borders of the metropolis, and had annihilated Ealing and Kilburn, might strike among these houses and leave them smoking ruins. It was a city condemned and derelict. In South Kensington the streets were clear of dead and of black powder. It was near South Kensington that I first heard the howling. It crept almost imperceptibly words upon my senses. It was a sobbing alternation of two notes, keeping on perpetually. When I passed streets that ran northward, it grew in volume, and houses and buildings seemed to deaden and cut it off again. It came in full tide down Exhibition Road. I stopped, staring towards Kensington Gardens, wondering at this strange, remote wailing. It was as if that mighty desert of houses had found a voice for its fear of solitude. Allah, 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 wailed that superhuman note, great waves of sound sweeping down the road, sunlit roadway, between the tall buildings on each side. I turned northwards, marveling toward the iron gates of Hyde Park. I had half a mind to break into the Natural History Museum and find my way up to the summits of the towers in order to see across the park. But I decided to keep to the ground, where a quick hiding was possible, and so went on up the Exhibition Road, and the large mansions on each side of the road were empty and still, and my footsteps echoed against the sides of the houses. At the top, near the park gate, I came upon a strange sight. A bus overturned, and the skeleton of a horse picked clean. I puzzled over this for a time, and then went on the bridge over the Serpentine. The voice grew stronger and stronger, though I could see nothing above the housetops on the other side of the park, save a haze of smoke to the northwest. Allah, 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 cried the voice, coming, as it seemed to me, from the district about Regent's Park. The desolating cry worked upon my mind. The mood had sustained me past. The wailing took possession of me. I found I was intensely weary, footsore, and now again hungry and thirsty. It was already past noon. Why was I wandering alone in the city of the dead? Why was I alone when in all London lying in state and in its black shroud? I felt intolerably lonely. My mind ran on old friends that I had forgotten for years. I thought of the poisons in the chemists' shops, of the liquors and wine merchants stored. I recalled the two sodden creatures of despair, who so far as I knew shared the city with myself. I came into Oxford Street by the Marble Arch, and here again were black powder and several bodies and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I grew very thirsty after the heat of my long walk. With infinite trouble, I managed to break into a public house and get food and drink. I was weary after eating. I went into the parlor behind the bar and slept on a black horsehair sofa I found there. I awoke to find the dismal howling still in my ears. Excuse me. It was now dusk, and after I had routed out some biscuits and a cheese in the bar, there was a meat safe, but it contained nothing but maggots. I wandered on through the silent residential square of Baker Street. Portman Square is the only one I could name, and so came out at last upon Regent's Park. And as I emerged from the top of Baker Street, I saw far away over the trees, in the clearness of the sunset, the hood of the Martian giant from which this howling proceeded. I was not terrified. I came upon him as if it were a matter of course. I watched him for some time, but he did not move. He appeared to be standing and yelling, for no reason that I could discover. I tried to formulate a plan of action. The perpetual sound of Allah, 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 Allah confused my mind. Perhaps I was too tired to be very fearful. Certainly I was more curious to know the reason of this monotonous crying than afraid. I turned back away from the park and struck into Park Road, intending to skirt the park. Went along under the shelter of the terraces and got a view of this stationary, howling Martian from the direction of St. John's Wood. A couple of 100 yards out of Baker Street, I heard a yelping chorus and saw first a dog with a piece of putrescent red meat in his jaws coming headlong towards me, and then a pack of starving mongrels in pursuit of him. He made a wide curve to avoid me, as though he feared that I might prove a fresh competitor. As the yelping died away down the silent road, the waiting sound of the Allah, 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 Allah reasserted itself. I came upon the wrecked handling machine halfway to St. John's Wood Station. At first, I thought a house had fallen across the road. It was only as I clambered among the ruins that I saw, with a start, this mechanical Samson lying, with its tentacles bent and smashed and twisted among the ruins it had made. The forepart was shattered. It seemed as if it had driven blindly straight at the house, and had been overwhelmed in its overflow. It seemed to me then that this might have happened by a handling machine escaping from the guidance of its Martian. I could not clamber among the ruins to see it, and the twilight was now so far advanced that the blood which its seat was smeared, and the gnawed gristle of the Martian that the dogs had left, were invisible to me. Wondering still more at all that I had seen, I pushed on towards Primrose Hill. Far away, through a gap in the trees, I saw a second Martian, as motionless as the first, standing in the park towards the zoological gardens and silent. A little beyond the ruins about the smashed handling machine, I came upon the red weed again, and found the Regent's Canal a spongy mass of dark red vegetation. As I crossed the bridge, the sound of the Allah ceased. It was, as it were, cut off. The silence came like a thunderclap. The dusky houses about me stood faint and tall and dim. The trees towards the park were growing black. All about me the red weed clambered among the ruins, writhing to get above me in the dimness. Night, the mother of fear and mystery, was coming upon me. But while that voice sounded, the solitude, the desolation, had been endurable. By virtue of it, London had still seemed alive, and the sense of life about me had upheld me. Then suddenly a change, the passing of something, I knew not what, and then a stillness that could not be felt. A stillness that could be felt. Nothing but this gaunt quiet. London about me gazed at me spectrally. The windows in the white houses were like the eye sockets of skulls. About me, my imagination found 1,000 noiseless enemies moving. Terror seized me, a horror of my temerity. In front of me, the road became pitchy black, as though it was tarred, and I saw a contorted shape lying across the pathway. I could not bring to myself to go on. I turned down St. John's Wood Road and ran headlong from this unendurable stillness towards Kilburn. I hid from the night and the silence, until long after midnight in a cabman's shelter in Harrow Road. But before the dawn my courage returned, and while the stars were still in the sky, I turned once more towards Regent Park. I missed my way among the streets, and presently saw down a long avenue in the half-light of the early dawn, the curve of the Primrose Hill. On the summit, towering up to the fading stars, was a third Martian, erect and motionless like the others. An insane resolve possessed me. I would die and end it, and I would save myself even the trouble of killing myself. I marched on recklessly towards this Titan, and then, as I drew nearer and the light grew, I saw that a multitude of black birds were circling and clustering about the hood. At that my heart gave a bound, and I began running along the road. I hurried through the red weed that choked St. Edmund's Terrace. I waded breast high across a torrent of water that was rushing down the waterworks towards the Albert Road, and emerged upon the grass before the rising sun. Great mounds had been heaped about the crest of the hill, making a huge redoubt of it. It was the final and largest place the Martians had made, and from behind these heaps there rose a thin smoke against the sky. Against the skyline, an eager dog ran and disappeared. The thought that had flashed into my mind grew real, grew credible. I felt no fear, only a wild trembling exultation as I ran up the hill towards the motionless monster. Out of the hood hung lank shreds of brown, at which the hungry birds pecked and tore. In another moment I had scrambled up the earthen rampart and stood upon its crest, and the interior of the redoubt was below me. A mighty space it was, with gigantic machines, where, within it, huge mounds of material and strange shelter places. And scattered about it, some in their overturned war machines, some in the now rigid handling machines, and a dozen of them stark and silent, and laid in a row, were the Martians, dead, slain by the putreficative and disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain as the red weed was being slain after all man's devices had failed, by the humblest things that God, in his wisdom, has put upon the earth. For so it had come about, as indeed I and many men might have foreseen, had not terror and disaster blinded our minds. These germs of disease have taken toll of humanity since the beginning of things, taken toll of our pre-human ancestors since life began here. But by virtue of this natural selection of our land, we have developed resisting power. To no germs do we succumb without a struggle, and to many, those that cause putrefaction, in dead matter, for instance, our living frames are altogether immune. But there are no bacteria in Mars, and directly these invaders arrived, directly they drank and fed, our microscopic allies began to work their overthrow. Already when I watched them, they were irrevocably doomed, dying and rotting even as they went to and fro. It was inevitable. By the toll of 1 billion deaths, man has bought its birthright on the earth, and it is against all comers. It would still be his were the Martians 10 times as mighty as they are, for neither do men live nor die in vain. Here and there they were scattered, nearly 50 altogether, in that great gulf they had made, overtaken by a death that must have seemed to them as incomprehensible as any death could be. To me also, that this time, this was incomprehensible. All I knew was that these things had been alive, and so terrible to men were dead. For a moment I believed that the destruction of, I'm going to butcher this word, Sennacherib had been repeated, that God had repented, that the angel of death had slain them in the night. I stood staring into the pit, and my heart lightened gloriously, even as the rising sun struck the world to fire about me with its rays. The pit was still in the darkness, the mighty engines, so great and wonderful in their power and complexity, so unearthly in their torturous forms, rose weird and vague and straight out of the shadows towards the light. A multitude of dogs I could hear fought over the bodies that lay darkly in the depths of the pit, far below me. Across the pit, in the farther lip, flat and vast and strange, lay the great flying machine that which they had been experimenting upon our denser atmosphere, when decay and death arrested them. Death had come not a day too soon. At the sound of a cawing overhead, I looked up at the huge fighting machine that would fight no more forever, at the tattered red shreds of flesh that dripped down upon the overturned seats of the summit of Primrose Hill. I turned and looked down the slope of the hill to where, enhaloed now in birds, stood those other 2 Martians that I had seen overnight, just as death had overtaken them. The one had died, even as it had been crying to its companions. Perhaps it was the last to die, and its voice had gone on perpetually until the force of its machinery was exhausted. They glittered now, harmless tripod towers of shining metal in the brightness of the rising sun. All about the pit, and saved as by a miracle from everlasting destruction, stretched the great mother of cities. Those who have only seen London veiled in her somber robes of smoke can scarcely imagine the naked clearness and beauty of the silent wilderness of houses. Eastward, over the blackened ruins of the Albert Terrace and the splintered spire of the church, the sun blazed dazzling in a clear sky, and here and there some facet in the great white wilderness of roofs caught the night and glared with a white intensity. Northward were Kilburn and Hampstead, blue and crowded with houses. Westward the great city was dimmed, and southward, beyond the Martians, the green waves of Regent's Park and Langham Hotel, the dome of Albert Hall, and the Imperial Institute, and the giant mansions of the Brompton Road came out clear and little in the sunrise, the jagged ruins of Westminster rising hazily beyond. Far away and blue were Surrey Hills, and the towers of the Crystal Palace glittered like 2 silver rods. The dome of St. Paul's was dark against the sunrise, and injured, I saw for the first time, by a huge gaping cavity on its western side. And as I looked at this wide expanse of houses and factories, and the churches, silent and abandoned, as I thought of the multitudinous hopes and efforts, the innumerable hosts of lives that had gone to build this human reef, and of the swift and ruthless destruction that had hung over it all, when I realized that the shadow had been rolled back, and that men might still live in the streets, and this dear, vast, dead city of mine be once more alive and powerful, I felt a wave of emotion that was near akin to tears. The torment was over. Even that day, the healing would begin. The survivors of the people scattered over the country, leaderless, lawless, foodless like sheep without a shepherd, the thousands who had fled by sea, would begin to return. The pulse of life, growing stronger and stronger, would beat again in the empty streets and pour across the vacant squares. Whatever destruction was done, the hand of the destroyer was stayed. All the gaunt wrecks, the blackened skeletons of houses that stared so dismally at the sunlit grass of the hill, would presently be echoing with the hammers of the restorers, and ringing with the tapping of their trowels. At the thought, I extended my hands toward the sky, and began thanking God. In a year, thought I, in a year, with overwhelming force came the thought of myself, of my wife, and the old life of hope and tender hopefulness that had ceased forever. Well, that was quite a chapter. The Martians are dead. You would think that could have been a good, ending point. But alas, he goes on. It's quite interesting. Makes you wonder of all the hiding and, crawling around hug Martians. How much sooner could he have come out and just brazenly walked around the streets, unhindered by the threat of Martians because they were all dead. You could never be too careful. Never be too careful. Alright, let's see. Chapter 9 is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 5.5 pages. It's not long. 1, 2, 3, 4. And about the same for chapter 10, maybe a little bit less, the epilogue. So, give me 2 shakes here. Just gonna send out a quick text message. All right. I think instead of ending at this point like I normally would at roughly the 2-hour mark, I'm just going to finish the book, because that way, next time when I come on, we will be reading this beast. This is a long book, Beasts of the Plains. So I will be contacting the author, letting them know that we're going to start that next. But in order to do that, we have to finish this. So I know we have about 2 minutes left on Stream Raiders. So I'll read chapter 9. I'll run Stream Raiders in the background, and then I'm just going to keep reading through chapter 10. I'm just going to plow through. So, Chapter 9 is Wreckage. And now comes the strangest thing in my story. Oh, we haven't seen the strangest thing yet? Alright. Yet perhaps it is not altogether strange. I remember clearly and coldly and vividly all that I did that day until the time that I stood weeping and praising God upon the summit of Primrose Hill. And then I forget. On the next 3 days I know nothing. I have learned since that so far my being the first discoverer of the Martian overthrow, several such wanderers as myself had already discovered this on the previous night. One man, the first, had gone to St. Martin's le Grand, and, while I sheltered in the cabman's hut, he had contrived to telegraph to Paris. Thence the joyful news had flashed all over the world. 1,000 cities, chilled by ghastly apprehensions, suddenly flashed into frantic illuminations. They knew of it in Dublin, Edinburgh, Manchester, Birmingham, at the time when I stood upon the verge of the pit. Already men, weeping with joy, as I have heard shouting and staying their work to shake hands and shout, were making up trains, even as near as Crewe, to descend upon London. The church bells that had ceased a fortnight since suddenly caught the news, until all England was bell-ringing. Men on cycles, lean-faced, unkempt, scorched along every country lane, shouting of unhoped deliverance, shouting to Gaunt, staring figures of despair. And for the food, across the Channel, across the Irish Sea, across the Atlantic, corn, bread, and meat were tearing out to our relief. All the shipping in the world seemed going Londonward in those days. But of all this, I have no memory. I drifted, a demented man. I found myself in a house of kindly people who had found me on the 3rd day wandering, weeping and raving through the streets of St. John's Wood. They have told me since that I was singing some insane doggerel about the last man left alive. Hurrah, the last man left alive. Troubled as they were with their own affairs, these people, whose name, much as I would like to express my gratitude to them, I may not even give here, nevertheless cumbered themselves with me, sheltered me, and protected me from myself. Apparently they had learned something of my story from me during these days of my lapse. Very gently, when my mind was assured again, did they break to me what they had learned of the fate of Leatherhead. 2 days after I was imprisoned, it had been destroyed, with every soul in it, by a Martian. He had swept it out of existence, as it seemed, without any provocation, as a boy might crush an ant-hill in the mere wantonness of power. I was a lonely man, and they were very kind to me. I was a lonely man and a sad one, and they bore with me. I remained with them 4 days after my recovery. All that time I felt a growing craving to look once more on whatever remained of the little life that seemed so happy and bright in my past. It was a mere hopeless desire to feast upon my misery. They dissuaded me. They did all they could to divert me from the morbidity. But at last, I could resist the impulse no longer, and, promising faithfully to return to them, and parting, as I will confess, from these 4-day friends with tears, I went out again into the streets that had lately been so dark and strange and empty. Poor guy assumes his wife is dead, which she probably is. Already they were busy with returning people, in places even where shops open, and I saw a drinking fountain running water. I remember how mockingly bright the day seemed, and I went back to my melancholy pilgrimage to the little house at Woking. How busy the streets and vivid the moving life about me. So many people were abroad everywhere, busied in 1,000 activities, that it seemed incredible that any great proportion of the population could have been slain. But then I noticed how yellow were the skins of the people I met, how shaggy the hair of the men, how large and bright their eyes, and that every other man still wore his dirty rags. Their faces seemed all with one of two expressions, a leaping exultation and energy or a grim resolution. Save for the expression of the faces, London seemed a city of tramps. The vestries were indiscriminately distributing bread sent us by the French government. The ribs of a few horses showed dismally. Haggard special constables with white badges stood at the corners of every street. I saw little of the mischief wrought by the Martians until I reached Wellington Street, and there I saw the red weed clambering over the buttresses of Waterloo Bridge. At the corner of the bridge, too, I saw one of the common contrasts of the grotesque time, a sheet of paper flaunting against a thicket of red weed, transfixed by a stick that kept it in place. It was the placard of the first newspaper to resume publication, the Daily Mail. I bought a copy for a blackened shilling I found in my pocket. Most of it was in blank, but the solitary compositor who did the thing had amused himself by making a grotesque scheme of advertisement stereo of the back page. The matter he printed was emotional. The news organization had not as yet found its way back. I learned nothing fresh, except that already in 1 week, the examination of the Martian mechanisms had yielded astonishing results. Among other things, the article assured me what I did not believe at the time, that the secret of flying was discovered. At Waterloo, I found the free trains that were taking people to their homes. The first rush was already over. There were few people in the train, and I was in no mood for casual conversation. I got a compartment to myself, and sat with folded arms, looking greyly at the sunlit devastation that flowed past the windows. And just outside the terminus the train jolted over temporary rails, and on either side of the railway the houses were blackened ruins. To Clapham Junction the face of London was grimy with powder of black smoke, in spite of 2 days of thunderstorms and rain, and at Chapman Junction the line had been wrecked again. There were hundreds of out-of-work clerks and shopmen working side by side with the customary navvies, and were jolted over a hasty relaying. All down the line from there the aspect of country was gaunt and unfamiliar. Wimbledon particularly had suffered. Walton, by virtue of its unburned pine woods, seemed the least hurt of any places along the line. The Wandle, the Mole, every little stream was a heaped mass of red weed, in appearance between the butcher's meat and pickled cabbage. The Surrey pine woods were too dry, however, for the festoons of the red climber. Beyond Wimbledon, within sight of the line, in certain nursery grounds, were the heaped masses of earth about the 6th cylinder. A number of people were standing about it, and some sappers were busy in the midst of it. Over it flaunted a Union Jack, flapping cheerfully in the morning breeze. The nursery grounds were everywhere, crimson with the weed, a wide expansion of livid color, cut with the purple shadows, and very painful to the eye. One's gaze went with the infinite relief from the scorched greys and the sullen reds of the foreground to the blue-green softness of the eastward hills. The line of the London Wide of Woking station was still undergoing repair, so I descended at Byfleet station and took the road to Maybury, past the place where I and the artilleryman had talked to the hussars, and on by the spot where the Martian had appeared to me in the thunderstorm. Here, moved by curiosity, I turned aside to find among a tangle of red fronds the warped and broken dog-cart with the whitened bones of the horse scattered and gnawed. For a time, I stood regarding this vestiges. Then I returned through the pine wood, neck high with the red weed here and there, to find the landlord of the Spotted Dog had already found burial, and so came home past the college arms. A man standing at open cottage door greeted me by name as I passed. I looked at my house with a quick flash of hope that faded immediately. The door had been forced. It was unfast and was opening slowly as I approached. It slammed again. The curtains of my study fluttered out of the open window from which I and the artilleryman had watched the dawn. No one had closed it since. The smashed bushes were just as I had left them nearly 4 weeks ago. I stumbled into the hall, and the house felt empty. The stair carpet was ruffled and discolored where I had crouched, soaked to the skin from the thunderstorm the night of the catastrophe. Our muddy footsteps I saw still went up the stairs. I followed them to my study and found lying on my writing table, still with the selenite paperweight upon it, the sheet of work I had left on the afternoon of the opening of the cylinder. For a space I stood reading over my abandoned arguments. It was a paper of the probable development of moral ideas with the development of the civilizing process, and the last sentence was the opening of a prophecy. In about 200 years, I had written, we may expect. The sentence ended abruptly. I remembered my inability to fix my mind that morning, scarcely a month gone by, and now I had broken off to get my daily chronicle from the newsboy. I remembered how I went down to the garden gate as he came along, and how I had listened to his odd story of men from Mars. I came down and went to the dining room. There were the mutton and the bread, both far gone now in decay, and a beer bottle overturned, just as I and the artilleryman had left them. My home was desolate. I perceived the folly of the faint hope I had cherished so long. And then a strange thing occurred. "It is no use," said a voice. "The house is deserted. No one has been here these 10 days. Do not stay here to torment yourself. No one escaped but you." I was startled. Had I spoken my thought aloud? I turned, and the French window was open behind me. I made a step to it, and stood looking out. And there, amazed and afraid, even as I stood amazed and afraid, were my cousin and my wife. My wife, white and tearless. She gave a faint cry. "I came," she said. "I knew. She put her hand to her throat, swayed. I made a step forward and caught her in my arms. The wife lives. The wife lives. Whew. And that's how chapter 9 ended. Xantharos, hello. Good to see you. Alright, let's start the battle. Alright, everybody. Good luck. 3, 2, 1, fight. How goes the stream? The stream is going great. We are 1 chapter away from finishing the War of the Worlds. So, loving it. We're gonna do this last battle here, and then we'll finish with our last few pages with the chapter 10, the Epilogue. Just gotta take out these last few enemies here. There's only 6 left. There's 18 of us. I think we can handle it. And there we go. Victory, victory. We have gold and gold. Good luck. David and Queen both get the gold. Good job. Alright. Excellent. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. I hope everybody's doing well. Alright. Got another sip. And that's why you add an extra chapter. Yes, absolutely. We have to have some good news in all of this, you know, craziness. Yeah, over here in Canada, though, technically a day early, it's Turkey Day. Well, fantastic. Happy Turkey Day. I hope you have a good time celebrating. That's awesome. Making me hungry. Well, it is 4:15 my time, so that would explain why. All right. One last chapter. It's only a few pages long. There is an afterword, but I don't think I'm going to read that on stream. So, yeah. I'm having red beans and rice. Red beans and rice. I have no idea what we're doing for dinner, but I'll be ready for it, no matter what. You know, I'm thrilled to bits that you've all been here. Thank you for sticking around with me on this story. This book has been fantastic. It's been a great read. I loved it, and I'm so thrilled that I have 6 more books lined up. 5 of which are by authors that are still alive. So I can't wait. It's gonna be great. I'm really looking forward to it. And one more time, I will mention our book club, Reading Coraline. If you are subbed to me, you can join me in a sub-only Discord reading on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we read through the book. So be there for that if you would like. I'm going to be reading it regardless, so I can be prepared for the book club discussion as best as I can. It is a creepy book, by the way. Very, very strange story, but I'm loving it. It's a great choice. I'm glad we picked it. So yeah. And with that in mind, it's a great book. Thank you for taking the time to read. Absolutely. I love this time that we have together. It fills me up in here. So I'm glad we can hang out together. So now let us continue. Let us finish the story of the War of the Worlds. Chapter 10 of Book 2, the Epilogue. I cannot but regret, now that I am concluding my story, how little I am able to contribute to the discussion of the many debatable questions which are still unsettled. In one respect, I shall certainly provoke criticism. My particular province is speculative philosophy. My knowledge of comparative physiology is confined to a book or two, but it seems to me that Carver's suggestions as to reason of the rapid death of the Martians is so probable as to be regarded almost as a proven conclusion. I have assumed that in the body of my narrative. At any rate, in all the bodies of the Martians that were examined after the war, no bacteria except those already known as terrestrial species were found. That they did not bury any of their dead, and the reckless slaughter they perpetrated point also to an entire ignorance of their putrefactive process. Putrefactive, that's a strange word choice there. But anyway, moving on. But probable as this seems, is by no means a proven conclusion. Neither is the composition of the black smoke known, which the Martian used with such deadly effect, and the generator of the heat rays remains a puzzle. The terrible disasters at the Ealing and South Kensington laboratories have disinclined analysts for further investigation upon the latter. Spectrum analysis of the black powder points unmistakably to the presence of an unknown element with a brilliant group of 3 lines in the green, and it is possible that it combines with argon to form a compound which acts at once with deadly effect upon some I am running out of words. Constituent in the blood. But such unproven speculations will scarcely be of interest to the general reader, to whom this story is addressed. None of the brown scum that drifted down the Thames after the destruction of Shepperton was examined at the time, and now none is forthcoming. The results of an anatomical examination of the Martians, so far as the prowling dogs have left such an examination possible, I have already given. But everyone is familiar with the magnificent and almost complete specimen in spirits at the Natural History Museum, and the countless drawings that have been made from it, and beyond that the interest of their own physiology and the structure is purely scientific. A question of graver and universal interest is the possibility of another attack from the Martians. I do not think that nearly enough attention is being given to the aspect of the matter. At present, the planet Mars is in conjunction with every return to opposition. I, for one, anticipate a renewal of their adventure. In any case, we should be prepared. It seems to me that it should be possible to define the position of the gun from which the shots are discharged, to keep a sustained watch upon this part of the planet, and to anticipate the arrival of the next attack. In that case, the cylinder might be destroyed with dynamite or artillery before it was sufficiently cool for the Martians to emerge. Or they might be butchered by means of guns so soon as they screw opened. It seems to me that they have lost a vast advantage in the failure of their first surprise. Possibly they see it in the same light. Lessing has advanced excellent reasons for supposing that the Martians have actually succeeded in effecting a landing on the planet Venus. 7 months ago now, Venus and Mars were in alignment with the Sun. That is to say, Mars in opposition from the point of view of an observer on Venus. Subsequently, a peculiar luminous and sinuous marking appeared on the unillumined half of the inner planet, and almost simultaneously a faint dark mark of similar sinuous character was detected upon a photograph of Martian disks. One needs to see the drawings of these appearances in order to appreciate fully their remarkable resemblance in character. At any rate, whether we expect another invasion or not, our views of the human future must be greatly modified by these events. We have learned now that we cannot regard this planet as being fenced in and a secure, abiding place for man. We can never anticipate the unseen good or evil that may come upon us suddenly out of space. It may be that, in larger design of the universe, this invasion from Mars is not without its ultimate benefit for men. It has robbed us of that serene confidence in the future which is most fruitful source of decadence. The gifts of human science it has brought are enormous, and it has done much to promote the conception of the commonweal of mankind. It may be that across this immensity of space the Martians have watched the fate of these pioneers of theirs and learned their lesson, and on the planet Venus they have found a secure settlement. Be that as it may, for many years yet there will certainly be no relaxation of the eager scrutiny of the Martian disk, and those fiery darts of the sky, the shooting stars, will bring with them the fall of an unavoidable apprehension to all the sons of men. The broadening of men's views that has resulted can be scarcely exaggerated. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the pretty surface of our minute sphere. Minute sphere, not minute. Now we see further. If the Martians can reach Venus, there is no reason to suppose that one thing is impossible for men. And when the slow cooling of the sun makes this earth uninhabitable, as last it must do, it may be that the thread of life that has begun here will have streamed out and caught our sister planet within its toils. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seed bed of the solar system throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that is a remote dream. It may be, on the other hand, that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, perhaps, is the future ordained. I must confess the stress and danger of the time I must confess the stress and danger of the time have left an abiding sense of doubt and insecurity in my mind. I sit in my study, writing by lamplight, and suddenly I see again the healing valley below set with the writhing flames, and feel the house behind and about me empty and desolate. I go out into Byfleet Road, and vehicles pass me, a butcher boy in a cart, a cab full of visitors, a workman on a bicycle, children going to school, and suddenly they become vague and unreal, and I hurry again with my artilleryman through the hot, brooding silence. Of a night I see the black powder darkening the silent streets, and the contorted bodies shrouded in that layer. They rise upon me tattered and dog-bitten. They gibber and grow fiercer, paler, uglier, mad distortions of humanity at last, and I wake, cold and wretched in the darkness of the night. I go to London and see the busy multitudes in Fleet Street and the Strand, and it comes across my mind that they are but ghosts of the past, haunting the streets, that I have the silent wretched that I have seen silent and wretched going to and fro, phantasms in a dead city, the mockery of life in a galvanized body. And strange, too, it is to stand on Primrose Hill, as I did but a day before writing this last chapter, to see the great province of houses, dim and blue through the haze of the smoke and mist, vanishing at last into the vague lower sky, to see the people walking to and fro among the flower beds on the chine that stands there still, to hear the tumult of playing children, and to recall the time when I saw it all bright and clear-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of the last great day. And the strangest of all is to hold my wife's hand again, and to think that I have counted her, and that she has counted me among the dead. And that is the end. Not the ending I was expecting, but then again, not that surprised either. Quite the book. Well done, H.G. Wells. Whew. Thank you, Skunk. That was quite the book. And I am so glad that I picked it. You enjoyed that? Thank you. No, thank you for being here. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too. It puts the movie into great perspective, and just how much the movie missed out on, and how much someone that's watching the movie just won't pick up on. H.G. Wells did an insane job, just massive descriptions at such extreme lengths to help the reader understand exactly what was going on. Don't really have words, but thank you. Well, done and dusted. Enjoyed it. Yeah, I get to add this one to my shelf, which is now growing. You know, bookcases where you put books because it's a bookcase. We now have books. Before it was just like baskets of pictures and whatnot. Unfortunately, the killer tomatoes attacked the very next day. How many books have you read on Twitch? This is number 3, I think, that we've actually like fully got through, I want to say. So, yeah. Because I've been streaming for like 3 months, a little over 3 months, but I wasn't committed to reading until the past couple of months. It took me a little while to figure out what I really wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a variety type streamer and do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of gaming, and I just decided, you know what, reading is my thing, and that's what I'm going to do. I have a full bookshelf, and we have put together a 5-tier, 3-section bookcase. That sounds awesome. So yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate all of you intently, and I think it's time to go raid. I'm excited for when you get to my book. I plan to give you all some behind the scenes. I can't wait. Yes, let me just pull it out here. We are talking about, in this case, the bubonic reorder. Very much a dystopian style, from what I can tell. So, it's going to be great. Got lots of reading to do. And lots of reading we shall do. I've got a nice, like next to me on my desk, I've got this pile of books. Okay. This book looks interesting. Yeah, I put out a shout on Facebook in a specific group, and I said, hey, I'm a streamer. I read. I want to read some more books by people that are here. You know, what do you got? And I received a ton of submissions, absolute ton. And I looked at all of them. I read the back, to see what they were about. And of all the ones that I received, I picked 4. And yeah, Goldie74 is one of those that I picked. So should be good. Gonna make some dinner. Thanks for the reading. Have a good night. Well, thank you very much for being here. David on the Air also reads on Sundays. Pride and Prejudice is his read right now, so feel free to check him out. Aaron Smith Audio, part of our USG, feel free to check him out too. There is still one of Maggie's books in the queue as well, right? I don't have one of Maggie's books in my queue right now, actually. I didn't add hers yet. So, it's always a possibility, but it would be like number 7 in the queue, so it's going to be a while. So I'm not too worried about it right now. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to raid over to Rio. It looks like she is just getting started with some Valheim. I am producing the audiobook of Maggie's book. That's right, Aaron is a professional audiobook reader, and he's fantastic at it. He has a great voice for reading, does accents and portrays the character really well. And so Maggie Berry 5 has hired Aaron to do one of her books. So that should be awesome. All right, join me in the raid. If you have my emotes, spam the hi. Sunglasses with the hi. I can't wait to see you over there. Thank you again for joining me. Get in my Discord if you want to see when I'm going to go live next. I will be adding another time to go live. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful week as you start out, and I will see you all very soon as we get back into it next time.
Atkinson! Hey, cutie! You finished that book today, didn't you? I missed the last chapter.